Brand names. Brand names are often thought to be just ways of being able to charge a higher price for the same product by persuading people through advertising that there is a quality difference, when in fact there is no such difference. In other words, some people consider brand names to be useless from the standpoint of the consumer's interests. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, once asked, "Why do we need 19 brands of toothpaste?" In reality, brand names serve a number of purposes from the standpoint of the consumer. Brands are a way of economizing on scarce knowledge and of forcing producers to compete in quality as well as price. When you drive into a town you have never seen before and want to get some gasoline for your car or to eat a hamburger, you have no direct way of knowing what is in the gasoline that some stranger at the filling station is putting into your tank, or what is in the hamburger that another stranger is cooking for you to eat at a roadside station that you have never seen before. But if the filling station's sign says Chevron and the restaurant's sign says McDonald's, then you don't worry about it. At worst, if something terrible happens, you can sue a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You know it, the corporation knows it, and the local dealer knows it. That is what reduces the likelihood that something terrible will happen. On the other hand, imagine if you pull into a no-name filling station in some little town, and the stranger there puts something into your tank that messes up your engine, or, worse yet, if you eat a no-name hamburger that sends you to the hospital with food poisoning. Your chances of suing the local business owner successfully, perhaps before a jury of his friends and neighbors, may be considerably less. Moreover, even if you should win, the chances of collecting enough money to compensate you for all the trouble you have been put through is more remote than if you were suing a big corporation. In an increasingly global economy, Europeans and Americans might be very hesitant to buy telecommunications equipment made halfway around the world in South Korea. But once the Samsung brand acquired a track record, people in Berlin or Chicago would just as soon buy Samsung products as buy competing products manufactured down the street. Asian companies in general have only in relatively recent history begun investing much time and money in making their brand names widely known, and still they spend less on this than other multinational companies. However, brand names like Toyota, Honda, and Nikon are recognized around the world, and the Cathay Pacific Airline and the Shangri-La hotel chain are also becoming better known internationally. Brand names are not guarantees, but they do reduce the range of uncertainty. If a hotel sign says Ritz-Carlton, chances are you will not have to worry about whether the bed sheets in your room were changed since the last person slept there. Even if you stop at a dingy and run-down little store in a strange town, you are not afraid to drink a soda they sell you if it is a bottle or can of Coca-Cola or 7-Up. Imagine, however, if the owner of this unsavory little place mixed you a soda at his own soda fountain. Would you have the same confidence in drinking it? Like everything else in the economy, brand names have both benefits and costs. A hotel with a Ritz-Carlton sign out front may charge you more for the same size and quality of room and accompanying service than you would pay in some comparable, locally run independent hotel if you knew where to look. Someone who regularly stops in this town on business trips might well find a locally run hotel that is a better deal. But it is just as rational for you to look for a brand name when passing through for the first time as it is for a regular traveler to go back where he knows he can get the same thing for less. Since brand names are a substitute for specific knowledge, how valuable they are depends on how much knowledge you already have about the particular product or service. Someone who is very knowledgeable about photography might be able to safely get a bargain on an off-brand camera or lens, or even a second-hand camera or lens. But someone whose knowledge of stereo equipment is far less than that same person's knowledge of photography might be well advised to purchase only well-known brands of new stereo equipment. Many critics of brand names argue that the main brands are all alike. Even when that is so, the brand names still perform a valuable function. The question is not whether Campbell's soup is better than some other brand of soup, but whether both are better than they would be if both were sold under anonymous or generic labels. If Campbell's soup were identified on the label only as tomato soup, clam chowder, or minestrone, with no brand name on the label, the pressures on all canned soup producers to maintain both safety and quality would be less. Brands have not always existed. They came into existence and then survived and spread for a good reason. In 18th century England, for example, only a few luxury goods, such as Chippendale furniture, were known by their manufacturer's brand name. It was an innovation when Josiah Wedgwood put his name on chinaware that he sold, and which ultimately became world famous for its quality and appearance. In the United States, brand names began to flourish around the time of the Civil War. In 19th century America, most food processors did not put brand names on the food that they sold, a situation which allowed adulteration of food to flourish. When Henry Heinz entered this business and sold unadulterated processed food, he identified his products with his name, reaping the benefits of the reputation he established among consumers, which allowed his company to expand rapidly, and an array of new processed foods bearing his name to be readily accepted by the public from the outset. In short, the rise of brands promoted better quality by allowing consumers to distinguish and choose, and by forcing producers to take responsibility for what they made, reaping rewards when it was good and losing customers when it was not. Quality standards for hamburgers, milkshakes, and French fries were all revolutionized in the 1950s and 1960s by McDonald's, whose methods and machinery were later copied by some of its leading competitors. But the whole industry's standards became higher than before because McDonald's spent millions of dollars researching the growing, storage, and processing of potatoes. Moreover, McDonald's established a policy of making unannounced visits to its potato suppliers, as it did to its suppliers of hamburger meat, in order to ensure that its quality specifications were being followed, and it forced dairies to supply a higher quality of milkshake mix. McDonald's competitors were, of course, forced to do similar things in order to remain in business. Afterwards, some might say in later years that leading hamburger chains were all alike, but they were all better because McDonald's could first reap the rewards of having its brand name identified in the public mind with higher quality products than they had previously been used to in hamburger stands. Even when the various brands of a product are made to the same formula by law, as with aspirin, quality control is promoted when each producer of each bottle of aspirin is identified, than when the producer is anonymous. Moreover, the best-known brands have the most to lose if some impurity gets into the aspirin during production and causes anyone illness or death. This is especially important with foods and medicines. Like many other things, the importance of brand names can be seen more clearly by seeing what happens in their absence. In countries where there are no brand names, or where there is only one producer created or authorized by the government, the quality of the product or service tends to be lower. During the days of the Soviet Union, that country's only airline, the Aeroflot, became notorious for bad service and rudeness to passengers. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a new privately financed airline began to have great success, in part because its passengers appreciated being treated like human beings for a change. The management of the new airline declared that its employment policy was that it would not hire anyone who had ever worked for Aeroflot. When it came to consumer products, Soviet consumers tried to make up for a lack of brands by developing their own methods of trying to figure out where a given product was made. As The Economist reported, in the old Soviet Union, where all products were supposed to be the same, consumers learned how to read barcodes as substitutes for brands in order to identify goods that came from reliable factories. In effect, Soviet consumers created brands de facto for their own benefit, where none existed, indicating that brands have value to consumers as well as producers. Among a business's assets, its money, machinery, real estate, inventory, and other tangible assets, its brand name may be its largest asset, though intangible. It has been estimated that the market value of the Coca-Cola Company exceeds the value of its tangible assets by more than $100 billion, and that $70 billion of that is due to the value of its brand. That is a very large incentive for them to maintain quality and safety, in order to maintain the financial value of that asset.